All right, here we are, episode 28 of the War Room. Guys, I got Sean Porth and Ben Bowersock joining us. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We we have some interesting topics to talk about. Last week was a big week, I think, for Demolition Derby. There was a lot that went on, and I want to talk about what we heard and what we did here. For those of you that didn't tune in to Scotty's podcast, some things we heard. We heard the drum being beat for change. We heard the need for organization, the need for entertainment. We heard the need for bigger audiences. We heard the acknowledgement of oversaturation. We even heard the county fairs defended for making money. Um, Heck, if you tuned in, and depending on which one you watch, we heard uh, the acknowledgement that Triple D has been beating a drum for a couple years. But it's about what we didn't hear, maybe that we need to get into tonight, and also like where are we at in the BS meter, right? We need to talk about where that BS meter is. Are we still sifting through it? Do we need to dig deeper into these comments? And these guys are on tonight, and hopefully they'll dive into that. You guys feel free to comment, and we'll get into all kinds of subjects that you heard last week or you want to hear us talk about this week. So, guys, what did we hear last week?
I'll let you start.
Oh, I get first dibs? Man, you'll never get a word in edgewise. You let me go. There's a lot. So let's start with this. What was the drum that they were beating? I heard that after everybody got done, they hemmed hawed, but they all came to one conclusion. I won't get to the conclusion yet. We'll build it up a little bit. What did you hear, Sean? I think they come to one conclusion. I think they all agreed eventually. They didn't want to, but there was one thing they got to, and then some of them wouldn't get to it, but their expressions was they should have got to it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think everybody has a lot of different opinions, but at the end of the day, like you said, I think they all came to the same conclusion. That conclusion being kind of a unified rule set, or some unified rule sets across the country. Something I heard was that it's going to be hard to tack the same across the country, whether the rules are the same or not, just because of interpretations and whatnot, which I kind of agree with. I don't know. What do you think?
You asking me or Dustin?
Whoever
wants to chime in. Yeah. So I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is I can be inspected fairly at every show. I mean, that's what I heard too. Everybody wants to be inspected fairly, or do they? Because we've talked about this, Dustin.
Well, this is the BS meter that we got to sift through. Like on this show, we are going to sift through that. We're not going to let anyone slide by on, hey, we need some unified rules and this and that. Well, first off, where are we at in the Derby world? Do the drivers actually want a fair inspection? And we kind of talked about that a couple weeks ago. Don't think they do. Drivers tend to just want a everything to go their way, and
favorable inspection, not a fair inspection.
Yeah, a favorable inspection for them, right? And often, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, often that favorable inspection isn't determined until after the results of the Derby, right? If you had a good day that day, pretty favorable inspection. If you had a bad day that day, somebody's got to be at blame. Do you guys see that?
I'd like to see us drivers actually put our egos aside and actually see if we really want to compete. If I get an advantage on Sean there and I beat you and I stretched the rules 4 times farther than you did, am I really the better driver than you, Sean? Was I lucky that day? I'd like to be able to compete. Me personally, I want the competitive levelness to be right there. So when I win, I don't say, hey, Sean, I built a car 3 times better than you did to beat you. I want to say we were on the same playing field and I won. Or Dustin, or I ran against you and beat you. I want that. I don't know why the Derby world out there wants to just be a winner. When I grew up, just winning wasn't, you can score 25 points on a team and your team lose, you still lose. I scored 25, 30 points. So same way in the Derby world. If I'm winning, but I got to cheat and do this, that's not a win to me.
So real talk here. I want to throw this at you guys. Is it the inspector's job to make sure, because this didn't really get asked, right? There was a lot of conversation about rules last week, but this never got asked. A follow-up question. Is it the inspectors and the promoters' job to have a fair playing field, or is it the inspector's job and the promoter's job to enforce the rules?
100% to enforce the rules.
Why is that, Sean? Why do you say that? I'm very curious of why you say that.
Nobody builds cars the exact same. You could have a field of 100 Fords, and more than likely, unless it comes out of the same shop, and even so, it's not going to be built 100% the same. Quality suffers from different builders, lack of time. As long as the car is within the written rule set, it's allowed to hit the track. If you're a builder building within the rules outside of the box, gaining the competitive advantage over somebody, that's allowed to be, or that's allowed. Everybody's interpretation of the rules are the same. It's the tech's job to make sure it's still within the rules, but it doesn't have to be cookie cutter the exact same.
So there's an important distinction there, right? And nobody really went into that last week. Ben, you kind of alluded to it there. You want everyone on a fair playing field. What did that mean to you? Did that mean that you want like IROC cars and everyone to actually be the same, or do you want to trust the inspectors and the promoters to do their job to make sure everybody's within the rules?
Well, we've discussed this before, and you made a good point, Dustin. So we don't always agree. We have some conversations off the phone that we don't agree. But you made a good point. So if I build a car, okay, but my build level is only a 7, and Sean, you build a car to a level of 10. Dustin, how do you expect a level 7 car, and how do you expect a level 10 car? Sean, like he said, he creative, he twisted the rules, he did this. I just think in my world, is that where we want to go? Do you expect my car to a 7 and make sure I'm in fair playing field because a 7's all I built, or do you punish Sean for being creative, and then I say, Dustin, you didn't have a fair inspection, but you actually did, and you put us both on the same playing field based on what we each built? So you kind of corrected me a little bit on it.
Well, yeah, and it gets pretty complicated. I heard this addressed a lot last week, but no one really talked about that, right? And what is our actual job as inspectors and promoters? Guys, there was some comments last week that if you don't treat us right, we're going to inspect you different. There was a lot of talk of we want fair and equal treatment across the board, but what does that actually mean? Does the guy that bring a 7, out of 10 car, what do you say to that guy when he meets a 9.5 car, and that 9.5 car spent 6 months in the garage, and the other guy spent a month? Should they be equal? Like, is there build skill, or is there room in our sport for that build to mean something on the track? I think there is, right? I mean, it should mean something. On the build should help you on the track, in my determined, at least what I think, right? What do you guys think on that?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that it's fair for somebody who builds a superior car. Let's say I rush a build. Ben spends, 3, 4, 5 months on a car, doesn't cut any corners, and then ends up having a better result than I did. I can't get mad at that. You can't get mad at somebody doing more as long as it's within the rules.
Well, then also there has to be some acknowledgement that everyone still has four tires, right? There's not a lot that you can really do to the tires, and it's really become a tire game. So if it's become a tire game, isn't it still in the ball still in your court to go out there and perform?
100%. And this is something I meant to say after Ben said it. You know, Ben could have 3 times the car that I do, but
No.
yikes. Ben could have 3 times the car that I do, but you know, if I go out there and blow a wheel off, you know, that 6 months doesn't matter, or the 2 extra sheets a half inch in his frame. It's all right.
Well, and there's not, our job is to make sure that there's not like the blatant cheating, right?
Right.
But no one really talked about like what the rules are, like what rules you enforce, what you don't, how you inspect rules, or how you keep rules similar. I know we talked about having different a unified rule set, and how that can happen, and how it could happen but. Is that really unifying the sport? Is it really, creating an organization by just dipping our toe in the water? It seems like there's a lot more that needs to happen than unified rules, if that makes sense.
Right.
So what else did we hear, guys? What else?
Well, let me chime in on that little bit of that last bit there, Dustin, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, getting to the level, is there some of us drivers, and I'll use myself for example, because I haven't played on this big platform long enough to call myself up there yet. And I'm learning because, like we talked, you've got to step up to this level of inspection of the 7 and the 10, because I really struggled with that. But after you guys explain that to me, it makes sense. Why punish somebody for that? Do we have a group of drivers that are like me, that they're not up to that level of the build? So if we did organize and we run out of organize, everybody gets to the same playing field of build. Like Seth or Sean, I'm sorry. When you guys go out to a team show, you guys all know that that's a little bit better build than a little local fair at home. Same with me stepping up into a bigger show. Those rules are a little bit bigger. Than I want to complain to Dustin, like, Dustin, that's not fair. Well, Ben, you brought a 7, he brought a 10. I can't, do that. Is that something that we're missing? Like the educational side of it?
To that, I will say, I will just tell you how Triple D does it and how we're going to enforce. It's our job to enforce the rules, and that's it. That's period. That's it. It's not our job to say, hey, you brought a 7 car, Ben, and you should go back to the pits and you should add this and this and this. It's not our job. It's your job to build the car. It's our job to enforce the rules. It's not our job to tell you that Sean called and said that he was doing this to his car. And it's not our job to pass that information along to Ben. It's not. If it's within the rules, you guys are competitors. It's our job to stay out of that and not murky the waters,
Right. And is that where controversy is coming from? Is that where why is this guy saying this to us? Why is them guys saying, Dustin, you ain't fair? And I think that's kind of the problem right there. Kind of answered it.
Well, this is maybe where we have some oversight. A lot of times I think, you can be thrown to the wolves on social media. This is not fair and that's not fair. But it was fair, right? And maybe you just weren't to the caliber of builder of this other guy. That's kind of hard to accept, and it's hard to tell somebody that. But those are some, cutting through the BS that happens. And guys, we have some really talented people that built these cars, and there's going to be different levels of the build. It's also why we implemented the format to make sure it's a little more even on the track. Those 4 tires can be beat off at any time. So Sean, you got anything on that?
Yeah, well, it's like we kind of mentioned earlier, you could spend 2 years on a car, have absolutely, to the finest detail, the best car there, miss a shot and blow a wheel off, or have somebody on the track be a better driver than you, which happens all the time. And, the better driver will prevail more often than not. It's always this sport is always the better driver versus the better builder, or to a certain extent, because look at some of your guys. Like, who do you have at your number one, number two spot on the best drivers out there, like your best drivers list?
Who do I have?
Yeah.
Well, we implemented a format to find out. And in my opinion, those guys are the best drivers on the planet at right now. And
Right.
that's because they have to beat people. So JT Hildebrand and the Allens are at the top of that list.
Right.
And obviously you've got Trace Braun in there, and then you've got Corey Roman. Look, it might not be the same list as everybody else, but I can tell you that these guys performed, and they performed in an event that made you compete against each other. There's a lot of other names you can throw in there. But
yeah. Well, yeah. Looking at that list, and then names that come up just throughout the sport, legends of the sport, and whatnot, do those correlate to also the best builders in the country? Because I don't think they do, to a certain extent. In some cases, not talking about anybody specific, but you don't have to be the best builder to be the best driver and to bring home the money in the end.
And what qualifies a guy as the best builder? Because his welds are perfect? Because he's a professional? Like, what is that? You know what I'm saying? Because he took the time to clean the paint before off his car, before he creased it, and now it just looks crisp. There's a lot of optics that go into what a build looks like, not necessarily how it performs, right? Or how a guy drives it. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, for sure.
Yes. But like I said, more often than not, the best driver on the track will prevail, barring anything out of their control.
For sure. Let's get into another topic in chat. I see some comments coming in. If you guys want us to talk about anything that you heard last week, we will certainly bring it up. And I told you guys how Triple D inspects. We don't inspect the car. We don't inspect the driver. We inspect to the rules. And that is our job, guys. I think the rules are the Constitution. Every promoter should spend enough time in their rule set that they are comfortable enforcing their rule set. If changes need to be made prior to the show, you got to let people know. Just a little clarification here, a little modification there, but it's our job to inspect to the rules. And then you don't get into this muddy mess of he said, she said, well, you told me this. Well, dude, just read the rules. Every time somebody calls me, I literally just go to the rules and I read the rule and I say, you tell me what you're seeing and I'll tell you if you can or can't do it. Fair inspection. So that's cutting through the BS of what all those guys said about inspections. Go ahead, Sean. You had something?
Yeah. So like you said just now and earlier, it's not your job to inform everybody else what has been asked and okayed or shot down as far as rules go, because everybody's brain works a little bit different. You don't want to give somebody doing less, you don't want to give them a bone to come up with so this is what guys are doing. And it also sparks unnecessary or maybe unintentional creativity that could burn your inspection crew in the long run, as far as creative ideas that wouldn't have been thought about unless you put it out there to the public. And also, one thing that I heard about inspection, as far as how fair it is, and one thing, why everybody overbuilds. I think one reason that everybody, or not everybody, but people overbuild for shows is because there's no consequence not to, other than the time of undoing your hard work and the money and wasted materials. That's why I like your show, and there's other various shows that will reward you for keeping your cut list to a minimum. You know, you give 2 fresh plates if you have 5 or less infractions, which could be kind of a murky, questionable thing sometimes, depending on how strict somebody wants to be on a car tech-wise. But, you know, I had 4 things to cut at King this past year and got my fresh plates versus when we went to Blizzard Bash, for example, and there was no incentive to keep the cut list short, and I had 2.5 pages, and the only consequence was time and cost of materials to undo what the hard work that we had done. So I think that's something that can be done to improve people's cut lists and tech times and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's talked about enough, right? You guys got to put things in place to help these problems out at shows. So there's a problem with overbuilding. Okay, well, we're going to reward the guys that don't overbuild. Simple as that. It's helped our inspections out a lot. We rarely, man, have had hour-long inspections, hour-and-a-half-long inspections. You've been there. We have time frames. We stick pretty close to them. Sometimes when you get a run of cars 10, 12 deep, you can get 10, 15 minutes behind, but we try to stick to that, you know, and it's a testament to you guys. It's a respect level for back and forth too, and what we're allowing. So Ben had to hop off here for just a second, but we may be able to get him back on. What else did we hear? I mean, we heard the need for entertainment. So what does that mean? What were these guys saying when they said entertainment? We need entertainment.
Action on the track pretty much was the number one source of entertainment that needs to be consistent.
So how do we get that? Is there any examples out there of better entertainment over another? We've had 40, 50 years of derbying.
Right. Team shows have proven to, regardless of the build, keep the pace up. Remind me again on the heat times that you've had here the last couple of years running the format.
We are averaging just over 14 minutes a heat.
That's not too bad. I think that's pretty decent entertainment. I do like the fact that there's not, you know, a ton of cars on the track at the same time. You can kind of catch all of the action instead of seeing so much action that you miss most of it. So quick heats, dialed the car number down a little bit on the track so you can focus a little bit more on what's happening.
But John, if you listened last week, we have an entertainment problem, and we have we need to appeal to bigger audiences, but we can't change anything.
Right.
We're not allowed to think outside the box. We're not allowed to change anything. So you can't mention the format, man.
Right.
That's an unacceptable thing. And that's kind of where are we at, you know, in the derby world. If we need entertainment and we need excitement and we need competition, it's like, hey man, you're starting to knock on the door of the format here.
Right.
Without knocking on the door, you know, you're certainly right. The team shows, they exist for a reason, and they're popular for a reason. They're popular amongst fans. They're popular amongst drivers, and there's a reason behind it. They touch on all those points that you're talking about, and then there's been no answer for an individual show, right? Or at least not an answer that people want to talk about, right? Or is able to be accepted. So that's kind of like, where are you cutting through the BS? Where are we at? Well, I think people show you with their money, you know, what they're willing to support and what they want to do. The show's going to fill this year, and that's really excited. So that means people are speaking, you know, with their money of what they want.
Right. In the past, there has been other things done on top of the team shows. Now the format, time limited heats.
Okay.
That has seemed to help to a certain extent, for sure. Build kind of plays a little bit part of that. The drivers on the track, it doesn't matter what the format is. The drivers on the track will dictate the pace of the heat. The time limit definitely did help, and we've seen, some of the best drivers in the country be forced to turn it up when they normally wouldn't because of that time limit. And same thing in the feature, a time limit feature, and then pay starts getting cut, which I don't fully agree with that. I think when it comes feature time, you gotta let it roll. You can do some things to dictate and pick up the pace, but at the end of the day, I don't think you can take away money.
So that's a tough conversation that really no one got into. I think it started to get touched on that there needs to be a better relationship with the promoter / driver and understanding, hey, I know the promoter needs entertainment, but the driver wants, to do it on their terms. So where is that happy medium, right? We've got to come to a clear understanding, promoter / driver, that there has to be an understanding there, right? In the past, it's been breaking sticks, it's been time limits, it's been, a lot of different things. Has it worked? Has it not? I mean, that's kind of where we're at in the Derby world, cutting through the BS. Does it work? Do those things work?
Yeah, like I said, I think the time limit helps. I don't think it's a quick solve to instant action. The format has been decent as far as picking action up because of the limited amount of cars on the track. You have space to operate, and you have to be on the aggressive side, at least to a certain extent. You don't have to be driving so hard that you are, putting yourself in a bad spot, but you do have to be aggressive. I think one of my favorite parts about it is the limited amount of cars in the feature. Because you can run 3-car heats, but if you still have 60 cars in the feature, well, that feature is going to take 2 hours more than likely, and nobody's going to be able to move. How many cars did you have in the feature this year?
We had 13 cars in the feature, and I like to have proof, of things that work, and we're paying the most money in the entire country, and we're having 45-minute features. Right. There's one reason. It's because we don't allow everyone in the feature.
Yep.
So that's another understanding that we've got to have, right, with drivers and promote. You're going to send a lot of drivers home that are not going to have good weekends if they don't get a chance to make the feature. But you have to have that, right? I mean, there should be some reward for winning, and you should feel very proud for making that feature at any event, not our event, but any event. And as a result of that, guess what? Like, you're going to have a lot better feature because guys can get with it. They don't have to sift through 30 cars to get down to the top 10. When you do that, it is guaranteed to be a long, boring feature. It's there's just evidence, and we don't have to make this stuff up. These aren't hypotheticals. There's evidence of this everywhere. These guys in the chat are talking about breaking sticks and give baggers 2 warnings and break their stick. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Now that I'm back, I can chime in. Sorry about that.
Right.
You talked earlier about like a shot clock or something or something like that. I've been beating that around since you said that, and this is just a thought that I've got. I've been to some shows where they put a 2-hour time frame on the clock, and you start losing prize money. Is there something that we can go that route, like our heats, which none of our heats at King really lasted that long? I mean, really. I mean, Dustin, what was the longest heat? It wasn't very long at all, if I remember right. But what happens if you can put a feature down to, hey, here's the time frame, boys, get it over, or you start losing money? I mean, is that an option? And there's all kinds of options out there, but which one's the best? So, I mean, I'll leave it with that. I like the idea of maybe putting a shot clock out. Like, look, boys, you guys want to putt around? Even maybe ours does. We didn't talk about any of this or discuss any of this, but hey, boys, the average heat, let's say the longest heat was 45 minutes. All right, so let's say a 50-minute clock. One of you better be standing, or you all 3 can just go through the consi, maybe even. I mean, but I don't think we need it in our sport. I think our show, the show that I'm running, we don't have that trouble. It's the other shows that you go to that's a 2-hour feature that drives me nuts.
Well, we're talking about solutions to problems that we don't necessarily have, right? Like, we don't really have those problems. Well, why don't we have those problems, guys? Like, it's really not rocket science. Why we don't have those problems. And it all exists because of the format. Now, the people are going to tell you what they really want and what they don't want. A lot of people in the chat here talking about breaking sticks, and I asked this here. Sean, what's your thoughts on breaking people's sticks?
I don't know. It's tough. There's definitely a time and place for it. It has to be a decision made without emotion.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
Right. We have a shot clock for a reason. Everybody gets put, on a timer. If you can't make a hit within that time, then, you break your stick. You have to.
Oh, Sean, you're muted there. You went to mute there for a second, Sean.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay. Everybody has a shot clock. Everybody gets put on a timer. You have to, as a promoter, word it very clearly how you're going to call and enforce hits, what is considered a hit and what is not. Like Sam ran into that issue at Gold Rush this year with a controversial call, whether it was a hit or not. You have to be very clear what that is and then enforce that. And anything within that is how you have to allow it. Whether somebody's lighting a car up across the track or putting around, a hit's a hit. So as long as they're within your minute 10.
Well, is a hit? Because, drivers want to hold promoters to a very high standard, but they never hold them to that standard. Hey, when you go to a show, Sean, do you ask the promoter, hey, what's a hit? I know I have 60 seconds to make a hit. What is a hit? Does that cross your mind? How they're going to call things?
We have asked before, not every show, but we have asked specifically at shows that don't really address what a hit is or anything other than you have 60 seconds to make a hit. Just because we've been on the receiving end of a bad call before or seen bad calls. It's just you have to cover the bases, and that way you can hold them accountable.
Well, most promoters put in there an aggressive hit. What does that mean? What is aggressive hit? See, it starts to get real murky and real subjective, like really quick. And it gets really hairy. What does it mean? Is the aggressive hit at the end of a show, the tap that you get, is that aggressive? Or do you have to be moving 20 mile an hour? Like, what is it? Because we know that those hits change. And at the end of the Derby, it seems to be determined that in most cases that a bump at the end of a Derby will win you that Derby. Well, I thought we were going on aggressive hit. So when did the rules change, right? And when did the definition of an aggressive change? These are all conversations that nobody really wants to talk about. Nobody wants to dig in those weeds, and address those things. They just want to, it almost feels like everyone just wants to take an easy way out, right? And the easy way out is just go out and break sticks. But it's very subjective. Like, how can you seriously break a stick and it not be subjective?
I think if you even had a perfect AI robot sitting over there, Dustin, and you was perfectly to the 60 seconds and you were fair, somebody's going to complain. That's so tough to. You guys got to make your best decision. You got to hit the clock. You start it. You stop it. And there's so many phones. It's just like football and all the replays. Why have referees if you can zoom it in and time everything? But we're human. You guys are human. And then you guys said about fair inspections. Do we really want a 60-second clock that at 60 seconds I'm done, or do I want that extra few seconds? So it's just one of them questions that I mean, even if you had the perfect answer and use perfectly 60 seconds, somebody would have been, I should have got 61 or 62. It's going to be tough.
And the reason why I bring this up is because the people will tell you what they really want, right? And do they want the subjectiveness to stay, even though they complain about it, or do they want you to put them in a situation in which the subjectiveness comes out of it, right? Do they want mad dogs? Do they want reapers, or do they want competition? You look through the chat. People tell you what they want, and that's an interesting. It's an interesting scenario of where we're at in the dirt, or situation of where we're at in the Derby world. But I think through real talk, we find out like, hey, this is the direction that people want to go. And, it comes down to real conversations and and being real about it. I can tell you this, or go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, I think my personal opinion on it is that you kind of have to work with the drivers. It won't be a perfect 60 seconds a majority of the time, especially towards the end of the Derby, when both cars are hurt and, everybody's just trying their best to move at all. I think there's a little discretion that needs to be used, and that, leaves the human aspect in the sport, just because there will always be some variance to it. Similar to like the NFL or football in general, I guess. There's been some controversy pop up, almost every weekend, this weekend included. But like a good example is like pass interference, or holding. That stuff happens at every play in football. It's just a matter of if it's egregious or not. I think the same thing kind of correlates and transfers to our world as far as what's considered sandbagging, reasons why you get your stick broke, things along that line.
So here's a question for you guys. Is our sport better if we have a little device, okay, in there? Hold on just a second. Give me 1 second here.
Hey, Sean, while he's off there, we can talk a little bit. Did you guys ever have a shot clock? Did you ever run a team show where you had a shot clock and had to finish?
Yep.
Sean, did you? What did you think of it?
I guess actually on the track, as far as like a time limit on the heat is what you're asking?
Yeah, like I think it was down in Kentucky, like the feature. I know the Heats didn't have it, but the feature was like it was a 2-hour timer, and they lost like 5,000 a pop. Have you ever run anything like that, or run under something like that, or?
I haven't ran, but I've been to shows. I know Mayhem, the last couple of years that Tori had it, I believe had a time limit on heats, and I'm not sure about the feature. I know heats were 20 minutes, and if you couldn't get it down to the top 3 cars or whatever they were taking, nobody got to go.
What do you think of that?
I liked it.
Did you like it?
Yeah,
I've mentioned that. Yeah, go ahead.
That was bone stock cars too, so in a lighter build, people are a little bit more apt to take it easy and kind of outlast versus take people out. So the first heat, if I remember right, it was the first heat hit that time limit because they weren't too sure if they were going to stick to the 20 minutes or not. And I don't think any of them made it. And then that set the tone for the rest of the show, and everybody picked it up from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because, that's what I like. I've been to so many shows. Nobody will load anybody up at some of these local little fairs anymore. And guys have got to stand. Promoters got to make a stand too and stick to the gun. So I would have liked that. So, but yeah, I've mentioned that around here. And even though we don't need it, but, 2-hour features. It's even for me. I'm a derby guy. I love going to derbies, and it's rough. It's tough. Real quick, while he's off here, what did I miss when I was off? Did you guys finish up on the where they were talking about what everybody was talking on the podcast and all the other promoters that were on?
Yeah,
give me a real quick recap, real quick. I don't want to bore everybody.
Yeah, just the fact that people don't want to change, even though we're asking for ways to increase the pace and action. at the end of the day, you're going to have to change if you want a different result. You can't stay the same and expect different results.
That is the key. Okay. That is so sorry, guys. That is so that's the key right there, Sean. If
Right.
you want a different result, you have to do something different, right? I mean, you have to entertain different things. So you guys had a good conversation going. Before I left, I was asking the question: is our sport better if we have a little device, okay, in your car that tells you what your shot clock is? If it tells you like when it gets reset, or if it blinks, let's say if it blinks a color when you get into 10 seconds to let you know, will our sport be better off if we have that?
I say no.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I'll disagree, but I'll let you give your reasoning why. First, Sean, why you say no, and then I'll say, because I've heard this before, so I have a different aspect. Go ahead.
So I say no, because it'll get used in the wrong fashion, as a lot of things do. It's kind of like...
So to that, if it's going to get used in the wrong fashion, it already is getting used in the wrong fashion. That's how people win, right? So do we need to change the rules then if it's getting used in the wrong fashion? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Maybe it doesn't have a countdown. Maybe it's just a red light and a green light. Maybe that's just how you know when a red flag happens, right? And there's no way that you missed it. Is our sport better? Because I think what I was kind of thinking is not necessarily a countdown, but like when it got to 10 seconds and it blinked, like let's say yellow,
right?
If it blinked yellow at 10 seconds, you knew that you had 10 seconds to make a hit. Then people wouldn't be able to play the system. Would it be better off if we had that? Because that's a little bit different than what I originally said to Sean.
Yeah. Sean, like you answered, though, you said earlier, like when we talked about the 2-hour time limit and the first heat, they loaded them all up. I think it's subject to that. If that thing's yellow and you're saying you'll use it, because then I'll be like, well, I'm sitting here until my thing turns yellow. Then I'm going to wait till it turns purple or the next color, and I'm going to play the game still. But boy, if it goes red and they come out and you're done, that was my side of it. That's why I liked it. I thought it was a good idea. So. That was my side. So.
Yeah, there's little intricacies to it. If it has a countdown or has green, yellow, red, it's a little bit, you can play it that way. You can, it's a better visual, and you know exactly where you're at shot clock wise.
What if it's just a green and red? What if it's just green and red?
Yeah, I would prefer that.
Okay.
Because then in a perfect world, what it would take to do this, I don't know. But green or red turns red for a red flag. You can really mitigate damage that happens on red flags when people, see a red flag and don't stop or just miss the red flag, because that happens all the time. And then, if it's just green or red, there's no way to know where you're at in the shot clock other than, once it turns red, then you're done. I think I would prefer that.
What about up on the wall?
What about these guys that are colorblind? Because it's going to happen. Right? Bill made a pretty good point there. Like, all right, what about the guys that are colorblind? I think there's probably a solution to that. Maybe just a word or something. But is the sport better off
top to bottom?
Is the sport better off if we have that? Can we get behind that? Is that something everybody could get behind if we actually had that? Because Sean, I can't tell you how many times people say I didn't see a red flag and smoke someone that clearly stopped. We had it happen last year in the front wheel drive class. And guys, it's unacceptable. It's like, as a promoter, that guy stopped because he saw the red flag, and damn well that other guy saw the red flag. Everyone stopped moving. Right. And he smoked that guy, and it puts us in such a tough situation. I think that as a sport, we can get better by implementing those things, those little things.
Yeah, that I could definitely get behind.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting concept for sure. Guys, oversaturation was brought up. You think that's a thing or not?
Of them know what you mean like that. You mean saturation as in too many shows? Well, kind of elaborate a little bit more, Dustin.
Well, there was a couple things that were brought up last week. There was the issue of oversaturation, and then there was also the issue that we don't have the same amount of clientele or drivers that we did 10 years ago. So let's tackle the oversaturation first, and then we can go into if our clientele of drivers is shrinking, and what we actually do about that. Because if that's the case, well, first, how do we identify it? And then what do we do? But let's do the oversaturation. Is there too many derbies out there? Too many choices? Is there too many builds? Oversaturation? Is that a thing?
Go ahead, Sean. I went first on the last one.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand the argument. I think there's maybe a little too much variance in builds to a certain extent. I can see if regionally builds were different, but it's you have 4 shows in Ohio and not one of the builds is the same. I think that hurts a little bit. But
what about this aspect? So what's the value of a car? Okay, my car. I built a car. I have it. I'm getting ready to go run a show. What's the value of my car to where I'm going? So if I go run at a local fair for $1,000 and I have $3,000 in my car and it gets tore up and the crowd's excited and they see it and I take it home, did I get the full value out of that car? Because cars are going to start dying off. I mean, we're going to have to move from. I mean, how many more years can you? I know you ran a Roundback. I think it was a Roundback, wasn't it? Yeah, but,
yep.
Okay, so how many more years is Roundback's going to be around? We're going to move on. So you're going to, if we're saturated with 1,000 shows and 2 Roundbacks per wagon show up, are we getting the value on our side? So my argument is I think there's too many shows. I do agree. I didn't before until you pointed out. But we're losing the value to what we're getting from it. Like, am I making sense or am I going down a rabbit hole here? You guys looking at me?
Sense. I mean,
so if I run that wagon and I get nothing in return, who benefited from that wagon? So if we go back up and we run 2 or 3 bigger shows, or we start, this organization and stuff, and we start getting more money in, then we start getting more value out of that car. And with value with me goes with value with the promoter, which goes with value for the sport. I believe so.
So knowing your value, I think you're talking about knowing your value. Sean, you want to comment on
that? Yeah. I mean, I guess I could. It's a subject that could go both ways, I guess.
Just go how you feel, man. You don't have to agree with us. That's what we're on here for. We can argue. You can make your point.
Yeah. I think that's why there's so many, or there's shows at different levels. You as the builder and whatnot can dictate where you go. You're not getting told to go somewhere specific. So, if you have a Roundback and you don't want to waste it at a fair, you don't have to. That's why those shows exist. I think we almost always build fresh for bigger paying shows just for the potential on return on investment. Because it's not guaranteed that you're going to win anything ever. But, if you have a $4,000 Roundback with $45,000 worth of parts in it, I think it's a little bit smarter business-wise, at least, to go support a $50,000 to win show versus, put all that money, time, and effort into a car to go run for $1,000. At least that's our mindset, I guess. If we can hit those smaller shows after the big show, then we're more than willing to do that. But everything's too valuable these days. Time's too valuable. Materials are so expensive. It's worth at least trying to go compete at the larger paying events initially.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder where the Derby world is at on that, because some people are choosing to do that, some people are not, and that's kind of the oversaturation piece. Like, what were they really talking about and meaning with the, because nobody really dug deep into it, right? It was just it was brought up, and look, let's face it, guys. I mean, a lot of these topics were brought up for the first time publicly, probably because the heat has cooled off. you know. Nobody was out there with the old pitchfork putting it in the ground and saying, "Hey, look, we need to talk about these topics 3 years ago." But it seems like there's things that these topics that cooled off. People can talk about them without being crucified publicly, and they're certainly being talked about. So, with that said, guys, like when we talk organization, okay, there were some other things that we're talking. When we talk organization, is that truly what everybody wants? Do people really want organization? Tomorrow. So my question to you guys is tomorrow, if an organization popped up and said, "Hey, it's going to cost $200 to be a part of this organization," would you jump all over it? That's and hypothetically, you have to live in this hypothetical world because obviously none of this even exists. This organization is providing you everything that you want. Do you support it? Do you not?
I moving up into what I consider my next level. Like I want to come up into the next level of Derbian. I think it needs to be. I love the idea. I hope it goes there. Again, I got sidetracked there a little bit. Had to mute you guys. I apologize again. I missed a little bit of the end of the conversation, but like I said, we're using these cars up, and I know that we don't use a round back for every local show, but I just think we're losing the value of our cars to what we can get back for it.
Sock got dropped there. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. That's something I'd have to kind of truly sit down and think about. It depends on what is being offered in return versus just promises being made.
When you say offered in return, it's a hypothetical scenario. What's getting Sean Porth on board for $200 to belong to an organization? What is it? Because everyone talked organization last week, but they didn't talk like, oh, what do actually drivers really want? Like, right? So Sean Porth, what will get you to pay $200 to belong to an organization?
Organization is in like a governing body over.
I would say an organization of whatever you wanted it to be, because I don't think I can put any parameters to it. I think it's got to be what attracts you. What would attract you? So what you envision when you hear that?
I think it would have to be a decent amount of like show options, I guess. Multiple shows a year,
Okay.
with the same rule sets, the same inspectors. Ideally, some like personal benefits, whether it's pay or just supplied parts or tools for pitting. Tents, for example, if the show's outside. Supplied tents, stuff like that. Just
so some extra amenities,
Right. Yeah. Okay. So more than what you would be able to get outside of going to a show and just existing there, paying your entry fee, and being part of the weekend, I guess.
What if that organization can't get there right away? What if they can't do that just because the first thing you got to do is raise money? I heard a lot last week about organization, but you know how I know that no one's really thought about organization? They never talked about how you get money to fund it. Because if you're talking about organization, who's going to do this? Right. Almost everyone doesn't do this full time. They have jobs on the side. So how are we going to fund it? How are we going to make sure that there's full-time employees working for the betterment of Demolition Derby. You got to fund it somehow. So what if you can't, provide those things right away, Sean? Because you gotta pay it forward, right? You got to put a foot in the ground and say, tomorrow we're going to start walking up the hill, but we're not up the hill yet, and we got to start. We're going to start today, and this is how we're going to start. Does that appeal to you?
It definitely could. There just has to be like contractually bound terms to it. You can't operate off of faith.
Okay. So you want transparency. You want to see, hey, look, if I give $200, I want to know where my money's going.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's pretty respectable. What else? Is there anything else?
I don't know. I mean, the imaginary $200 should be going towards something. I'm assuming that would be towards the collective war chest to improve the amenities that the drivers will be provided or whatnot. But yeah, just transparency. That's the transparency, and something on the back end. You should get rewarded for being there from the beginning on the back end once you get, once the organization gets to a place where it needs to be or everybody wants it to be.
Yeah, because everyone talks about TVs and sponsorships and this and that, but the reality is, man, if we don't have full-time dedicated people to tracking those things down, I don't know if it's possible. It's kind of a hope and a dream, right? You got to have some real commitment and real resources in order to go track those things down. There was a comment right here. That would come from a TV deal. Yeah, well, we just talked about how we need to improve the entertainment in the Derby world and how it's not sold to TV. How are we going to sell that to TV, right? And who's going to talk and who's going to put in those resources? So it's an interesting conversation, right? Because if we really are talking organization, okay, well, what does it really take to get there? And what are people willing to pay in order to, in a sense, pay it forward, right? What resources are we willing to give as a community? And that was something that didn't get talked about last week. I want to get Ben back in here and get his thoughts. Ben, what type of commitment would you be willing to make in order to contribute to a sanctioning body or a type of organization?
Yeah, I've been listening there. I've never had so much trouble. Nobody ever talks to me. Nobody ever hangs out with me. And I get on a podcast and 50,000 things have gone wrong. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
So, yeah, we was leaving off there with what we can get out of an organization and stuff. And, like the podcast, when you talked a little bit on, everybody's talking about, but nobody wants to jump on. And what does it take? What does it do? Well, I hear somebody that's screaming that and yelling that. He's up in the left-hand corner of this podcast. He's wanting to do it. You've been spreading this and this and doing this to get stuff to go towards that route. But who has to do it to help us to get there? It's not only just us, Dustin. It's the other guys too on the promoter sides, and I think they need to reach out and help too. And time wise, I mean, how many hours have you put in on Derby? And it's not something you just do lightly. It's hours. Well, I don't think people understand the side of that.
Well, this isn't just a me thing, guys. This is a sport thing, and that's another thing that I didn't hear last week a lot. Is we got to do it for the betterment of the sport. It's a sport thing, and what does that mean when we say it's a sport? If we want to talk organization, and we want a TV deal, and we want people to have opportunities that we didn't necessarily have. Well, it's a sport thing, and that means drivers are going to have to pay it forward. That means promoters are going to have to pay it forward. That means fans are going to have to pay it forward. And what does that actually entail? Does that mean higher entry fees? Does it mean lower entry fees? Does that mean a membership to the organization? Does that mean hiring full-time people? Well, what if I don't like those full-time people? What if they're not my cup of tea? There's a lot of things that have to be worked out in an organization. Who's in charge? What if I don't like the person in charge? Whose rules are we going by? What if I don't like the rules? So when you talk organization, there is when you start digging through the weeds, there's a lot of things that got to be discussed. And I think the most important thing is it cannot be done alone. It can't be one single person. It's going to have to be guys from, I mean, we got guys from Iowa. Sean's from Iowa, and Ben's from Southern Ohio. I mean, almost West Virginia, right, Ben? Like
I can shoot for West Virginia Riverbank. Yep.
Yep. So you're almost to West Virginia. It's going to take a collective group of people like yourselves to come together and say, hey, we're willing to do this. And that's why I asked, like, hey, what are you willing to do? People in the chat, what would you guys be willing to do? Would you be willing to pay $200, $300, $2,000, $10,000, 2 cents? What would you be willing to do in order to pay it forward? You know, and what does that look like?
I think it's like just like any other investment, and just a little extra for those who are willing to support you from the beginning. The return on investment, especially for those that have or will support from the beginning, should be substantial on the backside. But that has to come with time, and you have to get to a certain point before you can really see the rewards from that, I guess.
Yeah, and then like how long will that be, right? How much money do you really need to raise? That's another good question, right? Sean, you talked about transparency. Is it all about transparency? Hey, look, there's $100,000 that was raised, and this is where it's going. Is that good enough, right? What is the betterment of the sport? We've never really had any money dedicated towards bettering the sport. So what does that look like? You know, what does that look like to you two?
Well, I can tell you this: if I got some sponsors and stuff, and could move on and move upwards into the sport, then that would help us drivers out to get to there. But again, you've got to start that. You got to start the organization. I mean, like you said, Dustin, you all those questions you just asked and said is what's holding it up? Is it us drivers holding it up? Is it the promoters holding it up? The idea is there. I've heard from what I hear at the end of the podcast about everybody says they all come out and say, well, I don't want to admit it, but yeah, I think it would be good for this, but it's still not being pushed forwards.
So let's say us three right now are coming up with what we're going to do. We raise $1 million. We're coming up with what we're going to sell the Derby World on in terms of what we're doing with the $1 million. Where are we putting that money and what are we investing it in that you guys are going to be able to comfortably sell to the Derby World? Let's come up with it right now. And chat, help us out.
So you want me to say, okay, we three come up with $1 million. Now, am I a driver or am I a promoter, or both, or do you want it from both? Like,
you got to have
an open question.
You got to have it from all sides. What do we want to do?
So as a driver, I would look like, and I think Sean touched a little bit on it. What are you offering to us, like from the perk side? Like, you know, what comes out of it, what goes with it. And then what are we trying to, at the ultimate end of it? Are we making derbies better? Are we making it a paid sport? Is it entertainment? With entertainment, do I get paid?
Well, I'll stop you there because there's some chat stuff coming in too. So would you guys agree that we need to have an end game? So if it is paid drivers, a paid sport, is that what we're working towards? Do we need to tell people that? Do we need good facilities? Do you guys want to? Here's a good one. Do we need to invest it in facilities? Do we need to invest it in drivers? Do we need to invest it in seeking sponsors? You guys tell me. Where should we? I mean, this is all hypothetical. Where should the first $1 million go? Because it can go by really quick.
I think it's a multifaceted kind of plan of attack that you would have to use to make the most out of that, you know, first $1 million, let's say. A portion of that absolutely has to go to partial marketing and more so advancement into more big time sponsorships or something along those lines, something that will build revenue in the end. Eventually, in a perfect world, this would be a paid sport on the entertainment side of things, just like any other motorsports.
So here's a question Chris brought up. Do it like AMA. I assume that AMA has a membership card, and in order to participate in the series, you have to pay the yearly fee. Chris, what would you be willing to pay? What is that number? Send it over in the chat in order to do that. And what does that look like for you? Give us the number and what that looks like for you. There was a couple other things. Did we put any money into this? So there's a big inspector problem to education for our sport. So do we put any money into having the heads of inspectors go to classes, teach them how to inspect do we invest in those types of things and sell people on that? What do you guys think?
I was going to go there and couldn't get in. Like we all said, we want 4 people or 6 people to walk around and inspecting a car. We don't want a guy that's running a kicker class that's never ran a kicker class to inspect a kicker car or, a little car. Like, I wouldn't know nothing about a little car. You wouldn't want me to inspect a little car. So, the money's got to go into something like that to keep it all in-house and fair.
John, would you agree that maybe we need to throw a little education at these guys that are on the wall crew and inspecting the cars? And okay. I guess the transparency thing. Hey, this is where some of our money's going.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, right? When you start thinking about where you're going to put money to, I think transparency is key to things. Jared says that the first $1 million would go into TV commercials. Well, so to that, I say, okay, if the first $1 million goes into TV commercials, you spent all your money. You still have terrible wall crew. You still have a terrible officiating crew. You don't have any better communication with the drivers than flags that are 4 feet above the cars, and people are still waving them up here rather than down here where the drivers can see them. There's no education that goes into that. You still have a lack of being able to inspect the cars in a really good way. You still have, let's see, what else? You still have the lack of a true organization. So who's going to be putting the time? You spent $1 million in advertisements. Who's going to develop those advertisements, right? You can't just come up with them out of thin air. So do you have full-time people? Do you have resources? Who's making the decisions? When you start really thinking, you can't just spend $1 million in one place. You can't. But you do got to raise money.
Well, let me ask this, and I'll throw this to Sean. Sean, if you drive somewhere and go to an event, this is me. I don't have the porta power and the welder and the generator and all that to throw in the back of the truck. If I roll into a facility and there's no place to plug into anything, so what about a 4, 5, 6, 7 places that all have that? Put some money into the facilities. So when drivers come in, they got a place to park out of the rain. Can hook up to a plug-in. Like, I don't have to bring my water. I got my water, but I don't have a plug-in. I don't have a generator to run my 240 welder. Is that something that you guys look at, or is that something you guys run into traveling around?
Well, facility-wise, as far as the fairgrounds goes, that's on the promoter. Choosing the correct venue to support the Derby at the level that you want to support it at. That could be something that this fantasy governing body could be providing for its drivers, when it got to that point, is, a generator and a welder, or, something tool-wise along those lines that some people may not be able to supply or bring with to shows, or a communal, set of generator and welder and some hit and miss tools here and there, which Dustin, I think you had the welder set up for those who didn't have one in years past, correct?
Yep.
So things like that, show-wise, could make all the difference for somebody who doesn't have the opportunity to bring the whole shop with them.
Imagine imagine this, guys. Imagine if not only did I have that welder set up, imagine if we used some of that money to go out and create a relationship with Miller or
Right.
Lincoln Electric, right? And said, hey, bring 5 welders here. We want you to see our sport. We want to introduce you to our sport. We want to have the Miller or the Lincoln Electric weld center over here where you guys can take your vehicles in there and weld. Maybe some resources go there, right? That would go a long way into developing relationships outside of the sport. I want to comment on this real quick. Chris Quinsler said something. He said the AMA is like $50 a year or so, but he said it doesn't sound like he'd have a problem with 100 or 200. And maybe once X amount of years, maybe you can reduce your dues. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. When you're talking about money, AMA is a much larger entity, right? That has sponsorship money. Some of those dues definitely go to raising money for our AMA, but we've got to realize that we're starting behind the 8 ball here, right? So we're probably going to have to use a little or raise a little bit more money, and the dues have probably got to be a little higher up front. I mean, let's face it. If you get 1,000 members up front and they're paying $200, or if you have 10,000, you could probably lower the dues, right? Either that, or you could do a lot more. Maybe you could pay these drivers or whatnot. So definitely something to think about. Here's another comment, guys. Bill, these guys are hot and heavy on this. Different levels of membership with different perks: 100, 250, 500, 1,000. Yeah, I mean, definitely different perks, and you guys are naming some of those.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty easy to do and a pretty common thing, regardless of what it is. Membership wise, there's always different tiers, whether it's worth going to the highest tier or whatnot. Just completely varies on what it is, but it could definitely get to the point where it is tier based and worth going to the highest tier if you can. And on top of that, again, it's like rewarding those who support you from the beginning. If those guys have to pay $1,000 up front to join, but later on down the road, membership prices drop to X amount, how will they be fairly compensated? That should be part of like the layout plan.
Can we do it with us, guys? Can we do it with us if we just got together and said, hey, we want 1,000, 2,000 people to get together and put down $200, $300, $500, 1,000? Can we do it together? Because everyone else wants to wave the magic wand of getting the TV deal, right? Or somebody else putting the work in of getting the TV deal, or putting the work in of getting the sponsorship to get that money in here. Why would we wait? Why don't we just do it ourselves? Why are we waiting on that magic moment to happen when we can do it ourselves?
I mean, your heart and your passion's there, Dustin. I've not once heard you say, "What am I going to do with the money?" You've said since you've been on here, "What are we going to do with the money?" You want to give it back to the sport. I mean, that right there's a testament to the thing, and we get other guys in on board, and some of the upper guys step in. It'll be a reality for the rest of us. I'm willing to pay the way. I'm ready. Tell me where to go.
Well, we can't go anywhere until we get more promoters on board and drivers on board too. So that's why we're having these conversations, because it's a real thing, right? So Sean, you were going to comment on that?
Yeah, somebody has to do it, yes, but there has to be an extensive amount of planning, prep work, and information gathered to create a true business model, a true business plan, and then evidence to present to those who would be investing and trying to join. Because you can't just operate off a fever dream. You have to have evidence and a business plan and something that is physical that you can show, and a plan that you can lay out for somebody.
Let me chime in there real quick, Dustin. So, are you guys there? You guys glitched or something?
Yep.
So Sean, you started a team. I'm going to say this. I'm thinking this kind of goes along with this. Maybe not. So you have a team, correct?
Yeah.
Right. The FT. Okay. So you built a team. You're the head. I think if I looked on your Facebook, right, you're the head guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that not organizing something?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So I'm getting ready to start one. I don't have my logos done. I'm getting ready to do one. What advice to me? So we're talking about building this big organization. So let's start at our level. What did you do to start your team? Like, where did you begin? What did you build? What did you offer your guys? And then can we change that over to what we're trying to do with us and go to the bigger level and go to the big organization and join the big team or the big organization?
Honestly, it's just something that you can build around, I guess. A central idea, like the FTS, is just a general. At the end of the day, it's a general term, general team name that you can be associated with, that is easy for people to know, remember, and recognize, versus different names, because FTS, I guess, embodies myself, my dad, my cousin, and friends around the country, those who want to help, whatever. It's not a specific focus on one person, but it's also a general brand that can be recognized and then therefore supported easily. I do have sponsors, not as far, not big name, Pepsi, things like that, but sponsors that help in some way, shape, or form, more so than.
Do you think that would have happened without the brand?
I think it's easier with a brand just because it is more recognizable than a name on social media, I guess. It's a little bit easier to transfer and remember.
So a brand got brought up multiple times, and you brought it up too. What brand do we stand behind, right? What brand do we create? Is it an existing brand? Because these promoters didn't talk about that, right?
Right.
They didn't talk about which brand. I'm sure everybody has invested their own time and money in their own brand, right? So which brand ultimately is it that we stand behind collectively? Are you going to be okay with it being am I going to be okay with it being FTS, right? Are you okay with it being Bowersock? Or, how does that work? And I think there's going to be a little bit of that to work out too. I agree. It probably needs to be behind a brand. Definitely needs to be behind a brand. But what brand is it? Is it a new brand? Is it an old brand? Is it the most recognized brand? Is it who knows, right?
Yeah, and like I said, Ben, I think building a brand just makes it easier for people to remember and recognize. Like skiing, for example, I feel like most of the Derby community knows who Ski Inc. is, but a smaller majority knows who owns Ski. Jason Brodzinski is the one that owns Ski, and gets the parts out and whatnot. But most people just recognize the brand Ski. And so I feel like having a brand to back you and support makes it easier to become then just more recognizable. I think it's worth building a brand. And it's easier to sell later on down the road as far as for sponsorships or recognition or whatever.
Yeah, because I got Ski too. I mean, I went with Ski because they were first up in line, and I'm nothing against anybody else, but yeah. So I appreciate that, and I might be reaching out to you if you don't mind. Get you some of your do's and don'ts, so I don't do the same mistakes, or maybe kind of help me out. And then I think that's what this sport needs. Just like here, like me and you start to grow, and I start one, and then we move up. Maybe Maybe we just need some people to show that it can be started on a lower level, and it's nothing to go to the next level. I mean, it's just a step away, right, Dustin? I mean, this next step up is to the next level that you're talking.
Well, I don't know if it's a step away, but I know that saying I don't know how to do it is probably the first step, and having these conversations and getting input is something that we need to do, right? What I do know is that I don't think it could be one person. I definitely don't think it could be one person. I think the drivers have to have a say. I think their promoters have to have a say. And I also think that there has to be money involved. And a lot of people shy away from that right there when you talk money, but that's just real talk. You know, how much money needs to be raised in order to um, establish the sport. And then I wanted to get into this a little bit. What values is our sport going to be founded on? Is it going to be founded on the principles of, someday guys growing up to be professional athletes in demolition derby? Is it going to be founded on those principles? Is it going to be founded on competition? Is it going to be founded on getting the biggest stages? Is it going to be founded on investing in you guys? So if you guys are building brands within the sport, if there's an organization above it, it feels like that organization should invest in your guys' brands, right? To help you. So that way everything has little fingers and it just goes out, because there's going to be people that you guys reach that maybe that organization can't reach, right? So I think there's got to be some investment in those brands. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
So when you start to think of the structure of things, probably needs to go there, right? And someone said just start it and make it happen. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's probably, when you really start to dig down, there's probably a reason why this hasn't been done. And it gets really complicated and really hairy. But you got to have these conversations. You guys got better answers than I ever had. I love these comments. These are so good. I mean, I saw wiffle ball on ESPN. I think we entertain a lot better than wiffle ball. So I'd say it's not out of the reach. Dude, I know. And cornhole and, badminton and all these things, right? What do they have that we're missing? Well, I think really what it comes down to is they got a group of people moving in the same direction within their sport. Structure, right? They got a group of people with structure that believe in the top, and not necessarily everyone has to be the top, but leading to the top. That's really what they have, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, unity. We all want to get there. We're all in the same place. We're not worried about who's up top, who's bottom. We're all together. We're one.
So do we think of it like, go ahead, Sean. You got a comment there.
So one thing that came up in videos and whatnot, specifically like the cornhole league, whatnot, being on TV, it's easy for people to digest because there is a specific structure to it. The rules to the game are pretty clear. The different levels, like for example, if it were to convert to Derby, there's so many different class names. There's so many different drivers. There's so many different events with zero structure, and it's really hard to follow unless you're really into the Derby scene and follow everything. Even people in the Derby scene, pretty heavy. It's hard to keep track of all the shows, all the different classes. Nothing is named the same. Most of the names don't make sense. But
if we organized and only made 4 classes and we ran 4 classes all the time, all the same, boom, would that be better, Sean? I mean, would that get them like, okay, it's the welter class, it's the stock class, it's the vans, it's the mini cars, and then we went with that everywhere. Would that catch on?
Rule wise, I guess could vary. Names that are easy to digest and that make sense would help, because that's my point with like the different leagues and stuff. Everybody has the same common end goal. And it's easy to digest as a viewer who doesn't know much about it. You can kind of figure it out the more you watch without, taking a deep dive on Google to Google the rules and figure out all the specifics of it.
Okay, because
Go ahead, man.
I remember walking up into the stands though for my first time into a fair and seeing a derby. So I guess that's, I mean, is that, I'm not insulting or anything, but is that too deep though? I mean, because when I went up to a fair and I crawled up the stands for my first time, I seen 2 cars crashing. All I knew is the last car running. You think it's progressed that far ahead that we'd have to have the Derby World to where it's, hey, let's look the rules up and see what it is for this class and this class? I mean, I don't mean to throw you under the bus there,
No.
but that's just the way I kind of took that.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. Like at the base level, basketball is just throwing the orange ball into the basket. It's as you want to, you can go as deep as you want to go, I guess. Just making it as easy to consume as possible helps the progression of that.
So I think you got a point, and that's a little bit deeper of a take than I think most people have. And when you're talking about TV and you're talking about organization, you got to think a little deeper. And look, there may be people that don't agree with what you said, but it's a deeper take. It's a deeper look into what we need to do. And I think it's great, man. Eugene has said a lot of things, and guys, by the way, if you comment and when you don't get it on the screen there, or we don't address it, there's too many comments to address and keep the conversation going. So just keep them coming. He said, you've got high school, college, and pro leagues. We're trying to skip the college level. Are we trying to skip the college level, or are we trying to found the college level? Like, is there a college level? What is the college level? Where are we at? That is we don't have to dig deep into that. I just wanted to kind of throw that back, how that works. Here's another take. UDC Ultimate Derby Championship. Regional derbies hold qualifying events, national championship in some central state. The money for the membership would go to fund that championship. Blueprint has already been done by plenty of organizations that are not on TV, but all over streams that many people pay for. Examples would be AMA, USAC, Legend Cars, and World of Outlaws. This guy right here has done his homework. He understands that you probably don't need TV in order to be successful, but you definitely need some membership of guys paying it forward. And there's that transparency, Sean, that you're looking for. Hey, I want to see where that money's going. It's going to this, organization, and it's going to fund the big show at the end of the year. Pretty neat thing. That is a well thought out and well detailed. That's what we're talking about. Who has these ideas? Because last week, none of these freaking ideas got talked about. It was just a bunch of BS. There was no actually real talk of how to raise money and how to structure it. To David's comment, I would say, okay, well, who holds those regional shows and who holds those national shows and who makes decisions within that organization, right? There has to be that structure too. So there's a lot. There's really a lot. And we got to keep having these conversations, man. They might get dull. They might not be great, but we got to have that. You guys got anything?
Well, just like touching on that, are we pro? We minor league? We upper league? I think we're a step up from the bottom. I guess you can argue whether we're college level or going to the pro series or the next level up. I'd like to consider this the next level up. That's my thoughts. I don't think it's the little minor leagues. I think we've stepped up to something that's going to be better and greater for all of us. And we're not trying to hit everybody. I mean, we're not trying to change the whole. I mean, are we trying to go clear down to the local county fair to every show to be exactly like this? Is that our goal, or are we trying to start this organization and get Derby on the level that we're at to the level it needs to be? That's my thoughts.
I think you can only be at the highest tier that exists. Right now we're at the upper echelon of the Derby scene. Well, the only way up is to create a new level, so that has to be made. And I see a lot of things And like this comment, we have to build a structure like NASCAR. I see NASCAR get thrown around, or have heard NASCAR get thrown around a lot here in the last couple of weeks, as far as like what we should be looking at and building from. But I feel like that's such a huge brand and tier of motorsport that it's a little unrealistic to view what we have right now against NASCAR. I think there is other tiers that need to be hit before we start looking at that. That can always be the ultimate end goal, but there has to be lots of homework done and tiers hit to get to that point.
Yeah, NASCAR just signed a $7.7 billion TV deal. $7.7 billion. Little different than what we're doing. I know I think it's, people throw that out there because it's the big, it's the shining star, right? It's the sun that everyone wants to go out and touch immediately. But there is a lot of things that have to go right. What we can do is we can look at the structure of how NASCAR is, right? We can look at the structure of AMA. We can look at the structure of high school football. We can look at the structure of NFL football. We can look at all kinds of these structures and make our own. But it really comes down to, guys, if we can get a group of people within our community to go the same direction, and actually put money towards that direction. And that is, I think, with simplifying it, isn't that kind of where we need to take a stand? Like, hey, are we gonna be able to do this? Are we gonna be able to collectively do this together?
Yeah, I want to do this because I've sat in the stands and I went to the bigger shows and the bigger payouts, and my goal as a younger driver was to get to the next level. I think just like any young driver, they want to start out in the small races, they want to go to the big races, they want to end up the bigger races. Why can't we do it? Why can't Demolition Derby? Why can't I be the next platform of moving up, and then eventually, my goodness, way up top? I mean, I'm gonna go clear to the top with this. I want to ride this out. I've got a good 10 years left, so let's get to the top.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just trying to come up with a response to that, I guess. I don't know. I do like the fact that. What's that?
I opened my mouth when I shouldn't have. Go ahead.
I do like the fact that there's more youth-oriented classes and shows and main classes at this point at different shows. I do enjoy that they have become more prevalent, and it gives kids a good base to start from. I jumped right into full-size old iron cars, mod class, and you can only learn in leaps and bounds that way, I guess. The seat time that kids are getting these days is second to none, and I think that's there's no value that can replace seat time and the progressions and knowledge that is available these days is next level too.
But we're really not trying to do away with that, are we? We're not. I mean, what we're trying to organize is shouldn't do away with that. You still got to have those shows, because who else is going to step up? Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's nice that the kids coming into the scene now have that opportunity to grow and grow quickly and gain all of the knowledge that is there.
So right, like I told Dustin, Sean, I with my team that I'm wanting to start and my stuff and my logo and stuff I want to do, I've even actually said this. I would love to sponsor a kid that, because I never had anybody to look up to. Like I build in my own garage. I build by myself. My buddies come down once in a while. I would love to be able to start this and have a little bit of income. I'm not rich, and be able to tutor a kid, because that is the next sport. I mean, somebody's got to come behind us and lead the way. And what I want to do, and what I think that we're trying to do here, is build the next tier to get to, so each kid can keep coming up. So I mean, I don't disagree with what you said. You're right. I mean, we got to keep the lower stuff so kids can grow. And
Sean, for those of people that are listening, I want to break down your situation just a little bit. How old are you?
22.
Okay, you're 22. You're a youngster, man, and you got thrown right into it. There's not a lot of forgiveness in the classes that you're running, right? To make a name for yourself, you really have to throw a lot of money and a lot of time to compete in these classes.
Yep.
And that could be demoralizing if we keep that current structure for the youngsters to have to come up with that type of money, that type of funding, and then have to compete against the big boys lacking that experience. Could you imagine that if we created a series, right, where Sean Porth at 22 years old wasn't ready for the big stage yet, but when he got to the big stage, your resume was he is he's the high school state champ. He's the NCAA state champ. He's the, you know what I'm saying? The national champion, whatever you want to say. And then, by the way, Sean Porce on the stage of the national championship. I think you creating a structure within this organization would help not demoralize these youngsters. Scotty said it on his podcast. When he goes to the big shows and runs against the big boys, is not winning as frequently. And it kind of hurts your confidence a little bit. Well, the reality is you guys are pretty young, right, to be running against the big boys and committing these resources. If you're winning at these shows, damn, you are really, really good. Like, you are the freaking man, right? But that's necessarily not the case. And we definitely don't want to scare people away from our sport. The youth has done a really good job. The youth programs have done a really good job at establishing that and making sure these youth aren't just getting thrown to the wolves, because shoo-wee, man, you know it's rough, right?
Right. And yeah, I think for me, that was the best situation to go on because, I was here for it, I was prepared for it, and I have only learned from it, especially starting or like getting my feet wet. I ran what would be like a pro stock type build for my first car, and then it's been mods since then. And in that class, you have to learn, and you have to learn quickly, otherwise you get left behind. And quality shows, knowledge shows. So I've just been forced to learn and learn quickly, and I do all of the welding, I do all of the welding in our shop. All the cars that come out, I am the primary welder on. All of the knowledge research and not ideas, because we're a collective, but just all the fabrication stuff like that. I don't know. You have to learn quickly. So it's helped me, but it's definitely not the route for everybody, and it can definitely get demoralizing. So I think it is important to have some sort of structure to get your feet wet and to get introduced, so you don't get scared away or burn out quickly.
Yeah, and I think that creating that structure, I mean, is big, right, for the sport. So maybe some of that first, we talked about that $1 million. Maybe it's dedicated to creating that structure, right? This is the level that you compete on. And then when you're ready to go to that next level, maybe you do it through classes. Maybe you do it through shows. I've mentioned people have mentioned county fairs. That's where you should be. And then they should go to the big shows once they're ready. Maybe that's the structure. Maybe it's the class. Maybe it's the front wheel drive class until you're ready until you win that. And then it's the rear wheel drive class. Creating that structure, I think, is key, right? So when we talk about NASCAR and all that stuff, that's maybe that it's not NASCAR. Don't get caught up in the name so much as the structure in which they got the building blocks, right? And then I'll go back to the rules. People talk about rules. They want a unified rule set. Guys, unified rule set is like building a pyramid. That block is halfway up the pyramid. It needs to be put in place for the pyramid to stand, but you have to have the foundation first. You can't have unified rules without funding it, without educating these or having full-time officials on that actually can read rules. A couple comments in here that says officials need to stop reading rules differently. Well, I think they just need to write better rules. Honestly, I don't think you read the language differently. I think the language is intended to be used, right, in a way, but I think officials and in the current state of Demolition Derby, we don't have the resources to sit down and think through a rule set for 3 months. Really? I mean, think about it. You don't, because it's not your full-time job. You're just trying to do the best that you can. Well, let's get rid of the best that we can. All right. Let's get rid of that mentality and just freaking do it. Let's just be about it instead of saying, let's just do the best that we can because I only have 10 hours a week. Throw that shit out the window and just do 40 and say, I'm going to be a full-time guy and we're going to hire these guys and they're going to write rules. And that's the best that we can do. That's what you do with that money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One other thing on that, as far as rules go, unified rules would be nice, and that's always a goal. Not changing the rules year to year, especially drastically, would help a lot of different shows. I understand some people do it to keep drivers on their toes. I don't know. I equate it out to like a coach of a professional football team or college team or whatever. It takes time to put their philosophy in place, and if you only give them a year, then it sets everybody up for failure because then it's the same process over and over versus implementing your ideology and then building from it. The rules, you have your rule set, you take the time to write them correctly and thoroughly, and then you stick with that same rule set, and people will eventually learn what can and can't be done. It'll speed up the process. Everybody knows what they have to do on their next car. It would make life a lot easier to not have to build a completely different car for the same show year after year.
You're preaching to the choir there, brother. We really haven't changed rules in 4 years.
Right.
For that reason. I agree with you. I agree 100%. Guys, it's been a great conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had. I appreciate your guys' intake or contribution to this. I hope someday we can collectively come together and move one direction, because if we can get a group of people to come together and move one direction and take out all the minutia, the sky is the limit. And I hope that people can start to see that. Is it always going to be your way? No, it's not. Is it always going to be my way? No, it's not. It's definitely not. But if we can come collectively together and move one direction for the betterment of the sport, remember, it's for the betterment of the sport. I didn't hear that last week a lot. We have to do things that are for the betterment of the sport. And that requires us paying it forward. It requires us having these conversations. It requires these people we have 20 something people still live on here. And I know we're dwindling down a little bit, but it requires these 20 people to spend their Tuesday night listening to this, even if they're bored to death, because it gets them thinking and it gets their ideas out there and be able to type on the keyboard and tell us what they think. It requires all of us. And I hope that someday we can get together and move in that direction. So thank you guys for coming on. Again, for those of you that don't follow us or are new to this, we go live every Tuesday night at 8 Eastern Standard Time. I know we're getting people across the United States, and feel free to throw anything at us. We'll answer anything. You guys got
nice meeting you, Sean.
Yeah, nice meeting you too. If I could take a second to thank the sponsors of FTS, I would greatly appreciate that. I think it's due diligence to be done.
Have at it, brother.
Yeah, all right. So for the 2024 season, I would like to thank XP Derby Parts, Guard Speed Shop, A to Z Design, 448 Designs, Jaeger Towing and Recovery, WRP Derby Parts, Ski Inc., HLK Derby Parts, American Outlaw, GH Graphics, and NLR for continuing to back me and back us and provide us with parts to get the best cars that we can built and to the track.
And you will see Sean Porth at the King of Ohio in June again. And I'm sure that those sponsors that he just named, helping them get there, they're proud of their parts and he's proud of that car. And we can't wait to see you compete.
All right. Thanks for having me too, Dustin. Stock out.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you.